The country's cyber spy boss has revealed the role his online operatives played in infiltrating the Islamic State group. At a rare public address, Director General of the Australian Signals Directorate, Mike Burgess, detailed how his team destroyed terrorists' communications at crucial times during a coalition offensive.
The work we do makes a difference. And in the Middle East, our offensive cyber operators have helped make a difference between success and failure, life and death. At the height of the fight against Daesh, ASD, working at the direction of the ADF, helped shape a crucial battle. Just as coalition forces were preparing to attack terrorist position, our offensive cyber operators were at their keyboards in Australia, firing highly targeted bits and bytes into cyberspace. Daesh communications were degraded within seconds. Terrorist commanders couldn't connect to the internet and they were unable to communicate with each other. Terrorists were in disarray and driven from their position, in part because of the young men and women at their keyboards some 11,000 kilometres or so away. While the effect was almost instantaneous, it took many weeks of planning by specialist ASD and ADF personnel to make what happened and to ensure it went exactly to plan. When it came to the day of the operation, our operators were in constant contact with deployed military elements to make sure the effects were carefully coordinated and timed to precision. Our effects were generated in support of and in coordination with ground manoeuvres. This operation marked a milestone for both Australia and coalition partners. It was the first time that an offensive cyber operation had been conducted so closely synchronised with movements of military personnel in theatre, and it was highly successful. Without reliable communications, the enemy had no means to organise themselves, and coalition forces regained the territory.
That's Mike Burgess from the Australian Signals Directorate there. Well, joining us now for more is Tom Uren from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Good afternoon to you.
G'day.
Now, the Australian Signals Directorate doesn't give too much away. Why is it important to hear from the head of the ASD like we did today?
So the ASD has had a long history of basically not saying anything, but the current director, Mike Burgess, I think rightly has decided that ASD needs to be more open. So part of that is operating in a democracy. The people of Australia need to have trust and confidence that those kinds of naturally secretive intelligence organisations are doing the right thing and operating responsibly on behalf of the Australian people. Another reason is that he would like to be more open so that the people can understand the proposition for working for an organisation like that. So part of it is about painting a picture for recruitment and employing people. And I think third reason is that we'd like to influence countries in the region that are thinking of getting into the offensive cyber game. So Mike Burgess really painted a picture of how to responsibly use offensive cyber capabilities. So it's easy to get caught up in the hyperbole of a cyber Pearl Harbor and planes falling out of the sky, but he painted a much more proportionate and really highly targeted approach to offensive cyber that he'd like to point out to other countries in the region is the responsible way of conducting those sorts of operations.
I want to touch on that point. That's really interesting. You're suggesting that Australia there is kind of going about disclosing what it's done here in a way where possibly it could advise other neighbours in doing the same. I was wondering whether by disclosing just what Australia had done in terms of disrupting IS, it was indeed a warning for other nation states or terrorists who might be considering Australia and Australians as potential targets.
I personally don't think so. I think that Australia has, in this case, chosen examples that are relatively minor. It's not the sort of thing that would deter an entire country. So I think those examples are deliberately chosen because they show that we proportionately used a capability against IS. So that to deter another country, we'd have to talk about something that was much bigger and much grander. And I don't think it'd be the sort of thing that we would talk about because that would, in a sense, give the game away, and that another country we were trying to deter would just prepare against what they thought we would do. So I think it's much more a guidebook rather than a warning, is the way I'd think about it.
Now, you also touched on the recruitment angle, and indeed Mike Burgess was putting it out there today that the ASD would like more recruits. He mentioned women specifically for their involvement in this IS operation, in particular one highly trained young woman who used a series of online conversations to gradually win her male target over. Can you give us some insight into the intelligence sector? Is this an area where there are as many females working as males?
I'm pretty sure that there's not. Defence as a whole is traditionally fairly male-dominated, and ASD is no different, and in some respects it's perhaps worse because it's considered to be very IT heavy, and IT as an industry has been traditionally male-dominated. But this is where Mike is seeing an opportunity, that there's many women who are perfectly capable and would be highly competent at those sorts of jobs. And if they're getting turned off by the perception of what those jobs are, that's a problem. So Mike is directly trying to challenge those perceptions and make it clear that this is a job that appeals to both men and women. And if we can get, and that solves part of the difficulty of recruiting, if you're recruiting from the whole population rather than just self-selecting males.
Well, we learned today that the ASD wants more linguists, software developers, analysts, code breakers and behavioural experts. Can you just give us a sense of whether they would be hiring these people straight from university or from a variety of other workplaces? And do you think Australia is producing enough of them for this kind of work?
I think there's enough in all of Australia, but the problem is competing with all the other businesses in Australia that want well-educated, problem-solving individuals which are motivated to do a good job. So these are people who will generally do well in whatever career they choose. And so the question is, what's the value proposition for ASD in particular? So the actual job in ASD is a multidisciplinary one. So you need all sorts of people, as he described in his speech. And so the question is, what's the value proposition for ASD? Why should they go there? And part of what Mike was trying to do is paint a picture of why it's good work, the mission that they have and how that can be a fulfilling career.
And anyone watching this and thinking whether they may have a future in the ASD has to know, can they keep a secret? Tom Uren, so good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten.